I'm so happy that ICJ is taking the conversations to the next step.
Finally, we are at a point where we are launching it for purposes of consumption by the public and all stakeholders.
I think it's a very important discussion based on the kind of environment that we are facing in our country.
This particular baseline survey report documents findings from our conversation with different paralegals, CSO working with the legal aid sector, and also state actors like the National Legal Aid Service. So this particular baseline survey documents the findings and recommendations which we believe that if implemented will have legal aid service delivery to a different level. And before I invite my esteemed panelists, this particular project was supported by UNDP and Kenya, who facilitated the whole baseline survey exercise.
To begin is just to mention that this report was developed as a result of engagement with different stakeholders, that is paralegals and also state actors. And as a result of all the discussions that went on, there are a number of findings that came out. One of them is the appreciation of the journey that has been taken in this country to come up with the Legal Aid Act, because the feeling was most stakeholders were involved in developing the Legal Aid Act 2016, which has set a framework on legal aid, provision of legal aid in Kenya. So that was one of the findings, which is a positive one. There was another finding on how important the paralegal practice is in Kenya, whereas we know that paralegalism has for the longest time in this country the practice has always been pegged on civil society organizations. So, and also there are also community paralegals who are left out of this conversation. So those were some of the shortcomings that were coming as come out from this report that we are launching today. Also, there was an appreciation on the Act and the legal and general guidelines and regulations that have been developed, providing, facilitating legal aid in the country. So that was coming out from different persons that we spoke to. There was also an appreciation of collaboration that has been seen in that between the state agencies, civil society organizations, CBOs, and communities at large. There was a general feeling that there is collaboration within the access to justice space, which is a positive thing to mention. Also, one of the things I felt that came out strongly was how effective and strategies have accelerated access to justice and empowered, especially the communities and also indigent persons in the country. So one of the things that was coming out is the proactive outreach in terms of legal awareness. The general feeling is there's a lot of energies that has been put to create legal awareness on these issues, which is also helping, for example, paralegals at the grassroots in whatever they do in assisting the indigent and poor in the society to access justice. And that is, that has really worked as one of the strategies. Also, entrenching AJS, alternative justice system, as one of in the dispute resolution within the communities has really helped. This has also helped the judiciary in terms of reducing the backlog of cases that they've been dealing with. So that is a positive. It shows how much legal aid and how important legal aid to ensuring access to justice, and how much it has breached the gap of access to justice. The other issue is the continuous training and capacity building of paralegals in the country has helped, because we all know how important paralegals are in terms of offering legal aid to the society and the community at large. So the efforts of training them and capacitating them to ensure that they are well equipped with knowledge, especially on whatever is happening on the arena of law and whatever they are facing in different communities, because every community is facing different challenges. So there has been deliberate, and there's a call of continuous training of paralegals to ensure that they are well equipped with all this information, and so that they are able to be a force within the community, and also as they are helping the communities. So the other part is the community sensitization and education. As we are empowering paralegals, we should not leave the society or the community behind. For them, also understanding whatever is happening, for example, the Legal Aid Act, capacitating them is also important to ensure that they are also aware of the legal aid arena in general. And then finally, the collaborations between state and non-state agencies, that has worked. For the longest time, one of the challenges has been breaking the gap between state agencies and non-state agencies. How do they work together? Because at the end of the day, the goal is access to justice. And as long as these two agencies are not working together, then there will be a lag in terms of access to justice. So one is it's a call for a need to more, because while we have already collaborations happening, I think it is a matter of strengthening these collaborations to ensure that we work towards this goal. Yeah, so basically that is what I can mention for now, but there are a number of findings that have come out of this report. Also, it's a way of inviting our participants to also look at what findings have come out
in the country. So PLEAD is a project that is being implemented in sub-Saharan Africa. It's actually the largest funded project, and it is being funded by the EU. And PLEAD has two facets. We implemented PLEAD 1 and PLEAD 2 has two facets. So we have UNODC, which is implementing the facets that is targeting duty bearers. So their main focus, I think, in PLEAD 2 is on corruption. And they're working with different state agencies, especially within the justice chain. They're working with the Anti-Corruption Commission, they're working with the police, they're working with the judiciary, they're working with probation, with the Children's Office. So state agencies on the part of duty bearers. Whereas Kenya, which is a civil society facility within UNDP, is working with civil society. And this speaks to what Vincent was talking about in terms of collaboration, because you cannot have one hand without the other. And I think that is the aspect that PLEAD brings into the access to justice space. So bringing state agencies and citizens so that you have right holders and duty bearers working together. So going back to Aiden and access to justice and working with paralegals, I think some of the issues that Vincent has brought out that have been raised by the report have been exemplified by what Aiden is doing in the community. So Aiden is a paralegal. He was identified by Kenya Human Rights Commission as a champion very specific to issues around SGBV, okay? So he received training. You talked about training and capacity building, and he talked about the fact that now there's a lot of awareness in the community. So that was another aspect that was found by the report in terms of access to justice and awareness in the community. He's a paralegal who has undergone training. You also talked about training of paralegals, so they need to be trained if it is issues around SGBV, if it is issues around HIV. So we have different organizations that are implementing access to justice projects that are aiming to enhance justice, especially for vulnerable groups of people. So vulnerable women, you have children, you have persons with disabilities. So the question is, how do we take access to justice to the grassroots? And I think that's the question.
I'm going to welcome our third panelist, Ms. Mildred, who is a professional in the legal aid sector delivery. Mildred is going to speak about the future of legal aid from a CSO perspective. And perhaps, Mildred, before you put in your contribution, in 2020, LRF developed a status of legal aid in Nairobi County. And I'm very sure from that report, there were very good findings and recommendations which will steer legal aid at the national level. So will you kindly tell us more about the report and what you think the future of legal aid at the national level will look like?
I'm happy to be part of this launch, great launch, to just see how best we escalate and enhance legal aid provision in our country. So yes, Legal Resource Foundation Trust did an audit of legal aid in Nairobi, and some of the things that were mentioned at that particular report have also come out in this particular report we'll be launching today. And basically the need to strengthen paralegalism, because that's the basis and the foundation of legal aid in our country. Basically looking at how we can be able to document the work that paralegals are doing, and I'm happy that we are seeing voices of paralegals who are doing and touching lives in our communities. So that's a great way of documenting this work, probably just taking that forward and ensuring that we document more, because paralegals are doing a lot of work out here, but then it goes unmentioned because probably they're in the communities, people don't know where they are, and that the need to document that becomes a necessity for all of us. And as CSOs, I think that's a space that we need to pick and run with and ensure that we document this work, these stories that people are doing out here. Of course, we're also looking at, supporting paralegals to do this work, because we know they're doing pro bono work. So for us as an institution, we are learning that there's need to sustain this. Overdependence of donor funding is also a challenge that was brought out in that particular report. And we feel as an institution, we need to come up with sustainable platforms or initiatives that will ensure legal aid, and especially provided by paralegals, continues post donor funding, so that then it doesn't end with donor or plead funding that process, because we are aware that probably plead will not be coming back in the next future. So what happens after that? Have we prepared our paralegals to continue this legal aid provision post these projects? That is a question that we need to ask ourselves even as we launch this particular report. So also looking at the National Legal Aid Service Board that is supposed to coordinate. We are happy that very recently we got a representation from the CSO, and that is going to escalate and put the conversation from the CSO perspective at that level and ensure that the government is alive to the challenges our paralegals are going through, and of course put that kitty that is supposed to support legal aid in our country. Back to what the CSO should look at into, and probably in the promotion of legal aid in the future, we're looking at strengthening paralegalism. That's the main core. For us, we feel, because legal aid is the vehicle that drives access to justice in our country, and advocates are expensive. So how do we reach out to the common justice seeker? It is through paralegals. So how do we ensure these paralegals are able to deliver their role and they'll help communities access justice? We need to put justice advisory centers in our communities. How do we ensure that paralegals are easily accessible? They're able to operate in a very structural processes where citizens know this is where I can get a paralegal for free service, free advice, free legal information, and free referral processes that can help them access justice. That is one. We also need to ensure that these paralegals are given some incentive. That's a conversation that most of the time doesn't happen, but then how do we either work with the government to ensure that they see the light in that, and of course see what is in it for them, because when paralegals are able to resolve disputes, we are seeing a lot of savings on the government part. So how do we support these community paralegals who are doing a good job in enhancing access to justice by giving them a stipend or something to motivate them, so that then we also address the issue of corruption when it comes to legal aid at the level of paralegals, because they're human beings, they need to meet their needs, and who provides for that? Because they're in communities, not employed by any organizations, and yes, they need to live. So that's a question that we may pick as CSOs, and how best can we have probably innovations and how we can be able to help these paralegals generate income that will help them, live, but at the same time continue giving their services to their communities. Something else is to ensure that we promote or champion for AJS. Alternative justice systems are a key process for us, and for Legal Resource Foundation Trust, we've gone a notch high where we're having now elders going into prisons, and we're seeing them taking only 14 days to resolve matters. So that's a huge contribution in the sector. I know the AJS policy speaks towards sustainability of these platforms where elders sit and they're able to resolve disputes. They are good platforms because they enhance cohesion in the communities, they repair relations, and that's, for me, I think that is the future of legal aid, where we repair relations and do not leave conflicting parties more divided compared to before whatever sittings happen or before their dispute is resolved. So AJS are another legal aid provision mechanisms that need to be enhanced, and it's a call for CSOs to, pick this and run with it and ensure that we champion for AJS in whatever spaces we go to. And as we program, how do we also contribute to this process? Because we are the drivers of this conversation as CSOs, and because the government looks or relies on what we do, then let's show the way and ensure that AJS work is anchored and spread out evenly in the country. Finally, I also think of working with the CSOs to just ensure that we spread our services. Most of the time we find ourselves in same spaces when the country is very huge. So I think those are conversations that we need to pick going forward. How do we map out? And I know we're currently working under the Penal Reform Working Group that is currently, hosting and convening CSOs working or providing legal aid in the country. So how do we work and ensure that legal resource is not present where ICJ is, so that then we spread our services? And by doing that, we'll be able to spread the gospel of paralegalism in our country, AJS in our country, and we'll ensure that we put structures that will continue, delivering and reaching out to our communities, because we are here to serve them. We may not be here forever, but then how do we ensure that even as we continue, and probably our existence is extinct, but we hope we will not be extincted anyway, but then how do we ensure that legal aid continues post the funding that we have, and ensure that communities are, given the power to take the conversation ahead without civil society organizations. So that, for me, is the future of legal aid. Thank you.
One of the things that the Act provides for is the development of self-regulatory forums. And I was saying in that meeting, space that could be very, very beneficial to paralegals. Why? Because under the Act, any formations of CSOs who are doing work for public benefit can come together and form formations and can regulate themselves. And what that means is that formations like the paralegal chapters that are being developed by ICJ, for example, have an opportunity to come together. And the requirements of the Act are very simple. You need to come up with a code of conduct that you all sign. Of course, you need to have objectives that you're working towards that have to be for the benefit of the public. So what I'm saying is that I agree with you, the person who was speaking, that there's an opportunity for us as paralegals to come up with these formations and to have self-regulation mechanisms that will enable us to advance our work, but also will enable us to do our things in our own way. Because the reality in Kenya, and I think in many states, is that when you have a sector that is not able to regulate itself, then government comes in. And we want a situation where we are able to regulate ourselves as paralegals to advance our agenda and to have the greatest benefits to the beneficiaries. The Act also provides, and this is a conversation as UNDP we've been having with the PBO authority, how do we then ensure that these formations at the grassroots, at the county level, are able to move up and to be recognized by the Public Benefits Organizations Authority? And I can say that there's a lot of goodwill in the conversations we've had so far with the PBO authority. What we need to do is to come up with a standardized way, which we are piloting in some of our counties in Kitui, Kilifi, Kwale, Turkana, and Nairobi under ICJ, so that we're able to come up with a framework that can be replicated in different regions. So I agree with you. I think self-regulation is the way to go. And I think is the future you're asking, Damaris, about paralegalism, because through self-regulation, one, of course, we will be able to mobilize resources, because when you have a formation that is recognized, you're able to fundraise. The Act also provides for social enterprise. I worked with LRF, and they have a community radio that is able to bring in resources. So as paralegals, once you have those formations, then you have that opportunity to be able to mobilize resources and to advance the work that you do in the community.
One of the challenges has been the issue of resource mobilization, especially for the paralegals. And not only looking at that, I'm also looking at how strong you are as a chapter. I'm looking at a situation where I'm also just looking at exchange of information and exchange of expertise, because different paralegals have gone through different trainings and they have different interest and have dealt with different cases. For example, while interacting with our paralegals in different networks in the country, one of the things that keep coming up is, how do we solve this issue? We have this issue that we are dealing with at the community level, but we don't know what to do. But if you speak to other regions, you realize they've dealt with exactly similar issues. And that's why I'm saying that as when you come together, there's that resource of knowledge, information, expertise, and also I'm looking at a situation where, like Mildred was speaking of what civil society have been doing and what we should be doing in line of capacity building. You see, looking at the resources that we get and the shrinking civic space, if we are dealing with a community, different chapters, we are able to capacity build many, I mean a representation of different regions who now act as our disciples and go train other paralegals and share the knowledge. So yeah, it's a big resource, I agree, and I actually agree with the sentiments of our participant who raised that issue. Thank you.
For me, I think that's a very strategic conversation, because currently we're also seeing security threats on paralegals who especially handle serious cases. So I believe when they work in chapters or those networks, they're able to cushion each other and protect each other, because it's no longer merely as the paralegal, but Kino network or Mombasa chapter of paralegals who is handling a matter. So in that regard, we're able to ensure that paralegals work anonymously, but of course continue, championing for the rights of the communities they live in, because they live in those societies. And when you're branded as the Kimbelembele, then of course your security becomes an issue, and we do not want to lose paralegals in the process of, them giving a service that is really important in the society. So for me, that is a good thing that needs to happen to ensure that we protect our paralegals from harm as they deliver service to our communities.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the point that you've all been waiting for the launch of this particular report.